This conference will now be recorded.
Okay. All right, well, welcome everyone to the December TIC IPM Working Group Conference call. After Dr. Cornish's presentation last month, I've decided that I'm going to start using the camera feature because I really liked that she did that. So I'm going to start using the camera feature going forward, and anyone else who has comments at the end, feel free to turn your camera on too if you'd like. If not, that's okay too. For anyone new to the group, I'm Leah McSherry, the Community IPM Coordinator for the IPM Institute of North America. And for today's call, we have a Doctor of Veterinary Medicine, Dr. Thompson, with One Health Lessons, and she'll be presenting about how to effectively teach the public about vector-borne diseases. And then I just wanted to share a quick bio about Dr. Thompson. She develops One Health lessons for children ages 6 to 18 so that they can understand the connection between human health and the health of animals, plants, and the environment. Her lessons cover various One Health topics, including vector-borne diseases, waterborne diseases, food safety, climate change, and more. She is passionate about the science field and has taught her One Health lessons to underserved public schools and online. Based on teacher feedback, she has inspired over 2,000 children to consider a future in science, which is super cool. Her lessons have been taught internationally and are being translated to over 60 languages. And besides developing student lessons, which are delivered virtually and in the classroom, she is a veterinarian, a science policy advisor, a first responder, an award-winning public speaker and musician, and an overall One Health advocate. Before becoming a veterinarian, Deb taught music in a primary school and was a full-time instructor of the English language learners between the ages of 11 and 65 throughout veterinary school. And for years after graduation, she never lost her passion for teaching children. With these lessons, she combines her two passions, One Health and primary and secondary school education. And before we get started, I wanted to be sure to mention that the Public TIC IPM Working Group is funded by the USDA National Institute of Food and Agriculture, Crop Protection and Pest Management Program through the North Central IPM Center. And then also one last reminder to please make sure that you're on mute if I haven't already muted you, unless you would like to ask a question or share a comment. And with that, I'll go ahead and turn it over to Deborah.
Thank you very much for the kind invitation to be here, as well as the introduction. And thank you to the sponsors for having this be possible. And can everybody see my screen? Does that work well?
Yes.
Okay, I'm going to take silence as a yes. Okay, great. Thank you. So nice to meet you all. I'm Dr. Deborah Thompson. We're going to be speaking mainly about vector-borne diseases and education about them through the One Health Lessons platform, and also give you some general sense of how's the most efficient way to communicate such topics to children and the public. Let's first go over the timeline with One Health Lessons and onehealthlessons.com. Well, back in 2001, that was when I started teaching, at least teaching for pay. So I was teaching at that point math to adults who were attending a college, a local college. And then after that, I was teaching music in elementary schools. And then after that, I taught in secondary schools and taught adults English, as was discussed before. And that was all before going to veterinary school. So in 2008, when I went to veterinary school, I first learned the term One Health. And we're going to be going over what One Health is a little bit later, but the general way how I explain this to the general public is One Health is the connection between environmental health, animal health, and human health, and plants. So when I first heard that term, even though I have a degree in science, technically biology was the major, it was very heavy on ecology. And when I realized that I had never been taught One Health before graduating from the school, I was like, what? why didn't I know about this in undergrad? Granted, this is back in 2008, and now more undergraduate students have heard the term One Health. But then I also thought, why didn't I know about this 20 years before? That would have really changed some of my actions over time. It would have changed my life if I knew about the concept of One Health. Now, in 2016, that's when I first developed One Health lessons. And I was delivering these lessons, so I was delivering these lessons in California. I created these lessons after doing my shifts in the hospital, in the animal hospital. So like 10 hours and then going home, and then for fun, creating these lessons that focus on One Health. And then on my days off from work, then I go into classrooms and teach. And that was my background up until just recently, when I moved from California to Washington, D.C., and then I was starting to work in the United States Senate as a science policy advisor, and I was a fellow at that point. So, and of course, the pandemic happened, and so on May 1st, I launched onehealthlessons.com. Just a few weeks after that, I posted on social media asking for any possible translators. If there's anybody willing to translate lessons into any other language, I'd be really appreciative. This is all volunteer. Right now, we have 77 languages in process and over 500 volunteers around the world. So that's pretty stunning and something that I was not expecting when I first put out that question in social media asking, oh, is there anybody out there interested to translate? So that's the story of One Health Lessons. And tomorrow during another IPM talk, I will be diving into the process behind that a bit more. So again, what is One Health? It's the connection between public health, environmental health, animal health, and now, you probably know this, but the One Health concept, we also include plant health. But the way I explain it to children, if we have 4 things noted rather than 3 things noted, they're not going to remember the 4th thing. So that's why I have a picture of a tree in the environmental health section. Now, the One Health approach is teamwork between people who care for people, people who care for animals, and people who care for plants and the environment. And that's pretty much how I explain One Health to children. When I explain One Health to adults, I share a story of one of my friends' child. This is Jack. In this picture, he was 7 years old, and isn't he cute? He loves 2 things at this age: soccer and animals. And 7-year-old Jack turns into a 13-year-old Jack, and he loves these 2 things: soccer and animals. One day, Jack goes to my friend, her name is Amy, his mother, and says that he's not feeling so well. And then he starts to really not feel well. He goes to one doctor, the next doctor, the next doctor, eventually turns up in a wheelchair. Over 2 years, Amy and Jack went to see over 30 doctors. And it wasn't until Jack and Amy found a One Health team. It wasn't until the One Health team when they figured out really what Jack had. You know, believe it or not, there were physicians who said, oh, you know, he's 13, he's looking for attention. No, Jack actually had Bartonella. And this One Health team consisted of a physician and a veterinarian. You see, through taking a really good One Health history, they realized that Jack, about a week before his first signs started, 2 years before, had a little nick on his finger because he was playing around with a kitten, a stray kitten with fleas. And if you've heard of cat scratch fever, I'm sure most of you have, it can be awful, absolutely awful for people. So Jack was started on the appropriate medication and got back onto the soccer field. And that's how I explain One Health to adults, with a story. Adults seem to understand stories a lot more than, pretty pictures. So really, the question is, why aren't there more One Health teams out there? I think it's time to get that answer addressed as soon as possible. So again, what is One Health? It's the connection, right? Public health, environmental health, and animal health. Now, the One Health concept, that connection, as you can imagine, covers so many topics. Vector-borne diseases, as we mentioned before, agriculture. As you know, there are a lot of diseases that transmit between animals and people, known as zoonotic diseases, and especially with agriculture, antimicrobial resistance can be a problem. Now, the other week I was speaking with a large group of medical students of all different backgrounds, veterinary, human medicine, pharmaceutical, dental, and we were talking about antimicrobial resistance. And I brought up something that really not many people bring up, so I'm going to bring it up here today. When it comes to antimicrobial resistance, a lot of people think veterinarians are working mainly with agricultural, farm animals. But think about the animals that are sleeping on the beds, on the pillowcases. The amount of time that I've seen MRSA, or methicillin-resistant Staph aureus, that can be transmitted to people and cause issues in people, especially if they have a weakened immune system. It's stunning. So incredibly important to not just think in one subset of veterinary medicine as an issue with AMR. It's really all different species that we're working with. And we're also going to be talking about resistance a little bit more later on. Zoonotic diseases, biodiversity, and I'll dive into biodiversity a little bit more later on, and explaining really ultimately why is biodiversity important to make sure that we stay healthy. I'm sure most of you have heard that concept before, but how do you actually explain that to somebody, on the street? It sounds like it's out of left field. It just does not sound right. Why do I care about what's in the forest? Why does that have anything to do, or how does that have anything to do with my own health? I'll put the pieces together. Conservation is along the same lines. Disease surveillance and infectious disease surveillance in particular. Mental health. A lot of people, at least in this country, are starting to declare their pets as emotional support animals. Regardless of what your thought on that is, ultimately, there have been countless studies that show that having an animal near you can help your blood pressure, can help your stress level, but it's mainly, when it comes to zoonotic diseases, education, client education, public education. And of course, anything and everything dealing with pandemics, public health, global health, economy, vaccines. Okay, now let's dive into vector-borne diseases. And I am preaching to the choir, so I'm not going to get into all of these types of diseases, but I am going to focus on one in particular. So when I present the idea of Lyme disease to children, the nice thing is that a lot of people probably on this call today have presented the idea of getting rid of ticks in your area, or let's say protecting people from ticks. So the kids that I go in and talk with, they've heard something about ticks and diseases from ticks before, which is really great because they go to summer camp or they hear it in a TV show. So that's great. I'm taking it one step further. So we cover the risk of exposure. Where can you find ticks? And keep in mind, if we're talking about, if we are speaking to children outside of the area where Lyme disease is not found, then we talk about another tick-borne disease in the same typical manner. But right now we're talking about Lyme disease to prove a point. So we talk about where you can get Lyme, how long the tick has to be on you to get Lyme. Certainly other tick-borne diseases can be transmitted, within the 24 to 48 hours that would typically have to pass for Lyme disease to be transmitted, Borrelia burgdorferi. And then prevention. So when I'm working in the animal hospital, prevention is really, really important to review with owners, because ultimately they don't realize that the dogs that are going hunting, for instance, might be bringing in ticks into their own house or fleas, and what diseases could be found in those ectoparasites. So it's not just, when you practice veterinary medicine, it's not just thinking about your patient, the dog, it's thinking about the family that's reliant on that dog for either hunting or companionship, and knowing the environment that's shared between the people and the dogs. If I see a mother or father with their toddler in the appointment room and the dog's not on a flea or tick preventative, well, then of course I have that conversation, make sure that the dog is not bringing in, like I said, those ectoparasites in the house. But taking it one step further, I don't want to give a topical medication to that dog because there's a toddler in the house, right? Because what do toddlers do? They put their hands everywhere. And I don't want to have any extra exposure when it's not necessary for the humans in the home. So that's important to know about. The other thing, and we'll touch upon it a little bit later, but just to put the seed in, one product might work in one area of the country, but it doesn't work in another area. So something to think about. And I've been seeing that over the last 8 years. Now, vaccines. As you know, right now in 2020, there's not a human vaccine for Lyme. Now, there used to be, but it's no longer the case in North America. And for Lyme disease for dogs, there is a vaccine, and it requires a booster. And now, thinking about communicating science, and with COVID-19, and now people are starting to talk about the vaccines, the thing that really scares me is that, yeah, sure, we're talking about vaccines, but we're not talking about the booster. And that scares me for a number of reasons, because number one, there's enough people who have vaccine hesitancy to get in the way of themselves and of public health. Number two, if we can educate them enough to get one vaccine, but that vaccine type requires a booster, we have to make sure that they know a booster's needed, and that it's not a problem. The booster's needed not because of a problem with the vaccine. The booster's needed because of how our own immune system works. In this picture, the kids understand the importance of having 2 vaccines. They understand that having 2 vaccines will strengthen the body enough to be able to fight a disease such as Lyme. Granted, though, Lyme in particular for dogs, the best way to make sure that dogs don't get Lyme is to have good tick preventative, as well as combing out the dog after going on walks, just to get the nymphs off and everything. The Lyme vaccine is not 100%, just like no vaccine is 100% effective, right? And going back to the booster for the COVID-19 vaccine, it's important to remember that the timing is also important to not only educate the person who will be getting that second vaccine, The same thing in the hospital, in the animal hospital. For me, it's important to make sure that the owners come back at the right time to ensure the booster is given appropriately. Okay, I touched upon this just a little bit before, but let's dive in a bit more. So I was educated in Massachusetts, and then I moved to Southern California, and then I moved up to Central California, and now I'm back on the East Coast. From there, I've seen that a particular type of topical flea preventative worked okay for ticks out here, but did nothing for fleas, nothing. But it was advertised for ticks and fleas. On the East Coast, my friends at the exact same time were telling me that the exact same product worked well for fleas, but did nothing for ticks. Well, isn't that interesting? And when I went to the company, I met some representatives from that company years ago at a convention, and I said, heads up, in California, we're not seeing that this is working well for our patients. And the person's like, oh, that's news to me. But it was funny because you go on this, it's this international platform where veterinarians can share ideas and share cases with each other and help each other and share knowledge. And so I saw over and over again that people were having the exact same problem down here, same problem up here. So this resistance is starting to build up more and more. And so we're getting new products on the market, which is good to help our patients today. But just the other day when I gave a medication to a patient, the owner's like, okay, is this product good for life? I said, well, it's good until there's resistance that builds up against this product. And that's just the way nature is. So we will have to most likely change the product for this particular dog in a few years. So how to discuss flea and tick preventative with families? You have to have a One Health mindset. Like what I was saying before, it's not just, as a veterinarian, it's not just thinking about the patient, it's thinking about where that patient is. Is the patient sleeping on the couch or the bed, right? Are there toddlers in the house? Are there immunosuppressed people in the house? Anybody on chemotherapy? Anybody with some really odd signs at home that could be resembling a tick-borne or flea-borne disease? And then also make sure that all of the animals are on good preventative. So again, the One Health mindset, animal, environment, and human health all combined. Okay, and climate change. This is something that I speak with students when I educate them about vector-borne diseases. And you know, I was pretty amazed with them catching it like that. The last class that I taught this lesson to, they consisted of 12 to 14-year-olds. And they were really understanding that ultimately when there are changes in the environment due to climate change or other changes to habitats for various reasons, there are going to be changes in the diseases that come with animals that are moving. And when I say animals, I of course include ectoparasites. So children are understanding this. Adults are starting to understand this now. When it comes to climate change, for some folks, I would say pick your battles. Ultimately, some people, at least when I was working on the Hill, on Capitol Hill, they were not necessarily of the mindset to agree or disagree or get into the cause of climate change, but they did appreciate that there is changing of the climate. So just work with that at with the best of your ability. Okay, so how do you combine One Health and vector-borne diseases in your single message? First, introduce the idea of a vector-borne disease. You can use Lyme, especially if it's endemic to that area, right? You can use Rocky Mountain spotted fever in another area. You know, tailor your message is what I'm trying to say. Then tell a story. Figure out how this combined message can impact the family. Okay, if you're talking about, say, from the veterinary perspective, it's a good idea to give flea and tick preventative to your dog. Then will that child thinking and petting that dog later on ask their parent, oh, is Fluffy on a preventative? And then they can start the conversation. So by teaching one generation, you actually can teach multiple. And once you change a family, then you impact a community. And then from there, it just grows bigger and bigger. I know it grows bigger and bigger because I have experience teaching One Health to the public as well as to children, both online and in person and of various ages. Homeschooling students are also learning the same material as lessons that are available to the typical school, the formal or the brick and mortar type of school setting. And that's because of onehealthlessons.com. So the motto is, we live in one world, it's time to talk about One Health. And it's meant to inspire the next generation to see the world as one, as connected. And this is the way I explain One Health to children with a story that we walk through. And we can certainly think about how vector-borne diseases relate to this. Because you see how there are mice down here? And we all know that, the white-footed mouse is responsible, or one of the major players in transmission of Lyme. So this is a healthy forest. This is the way I explain it to the students, just to get them to understand a little bit more. Healthy forest, minimal competition for food, for shelter. And then something changes. And we have a conversation. Why is the forest getting smaller? It could be because people are chopping down the trees for their heat, for building a home, or clearing land for farms, right? Or can be the forest to be shrinking because of climate change. One reason or another, regardless, the forest is shrinking. When that happens, animals are starting to get stressed because there's more food and competition for shelter, more competition for food and shelter. And so they're getting forced out into areas around people. And I was teaching this lesson to 8-year-olds a few hours ago, and they're like, oh yeah, they're going out into the cities. Yeah, right? They're going out near people. And just by adding more people, the problems get exacerbated because we have to talk about vector-borne diseases and zoonotic diseases in general. And just when we have species that really don't belong near each other, there can be complications. Taking it one step further, and remember I mentioned biodiversity and conservation. Well, this is what we discuss. Say, for instance, if all of the birds leave the forest, they go extinct, or they go to another forest, or the water is so dirty that their habitat is not functioning to the best of their ability, so they leave. Okay, so if they all leave, there are going to be consequences, right? There are less trees. Why? Because some birds are responsible for seed dispersal. There are more mice. Why? Because these birds, some of these other birds are eating mice, and when the predator leaves, then the prey population explodes, right? And 8-year-olds get this. They understand. The youngest, well, next week I'm going to be teaching 4 and 5-year-olds. So we're going to be very high level on this type of slide. However, certainly 8-year-olds, 7-year-old and 8-year-olds understand the predator and prey relationship. So when the mouse population increases, the fox population increases, and just to point out, how many animals are actually near people and why is that a concern? And we have a discussion with the students. And ultimately, when you go to onehealthlessons.com, you're going to be able to see in the lessons section 7 different age-appropriate lessons for COVID-19. That has the slides that we just went through. You'll see reviews from teachers and parents. In the About section, you can learn about all of the people working towards this mission of educating and inspiring the next generation to see the world as one. Fortunately, these lessons, these COVID-19 lessons, are being translated into right now 77 different languages, and these listed here are just a few of those. And this is somebody teaching One Health using the material from onehealthlessons.com in Nigeria. And I'll just leave you with these photos to look at. And this is in Peru. So you can see the idea of One Health, the idea of the connection between the environment, our own health, animals and plants. This message is getting out to children around the world, and it's even hitting the clouds. And it's not possible to have this happen without the hundreds of people on the ground working towards this. I'm happy to answer any questions. You're welcome to connect with me on LinkedIn, on all of the other social media that's there, as well as emailing me. And I just wanted to put in a plug for tomorrow. Tomorrow we're diving in even more into the global One Health education movement that's happening. And I invite you to attend that, and this is how you can sign up. So thank you very much for your time.
Sorry, I was having some technical difficulties there. Thanks so much, Jen. Does anyone have any questions that they would like to ask? All right. Well, if we don't have any questions, I guess we have a lot of time left. If anyone has any updates that they'd like to share or any other questions about the session tomorrow or anything like that.
Hi, I have a couple of quick questions, if I could ask.
Of course.
One is this is a very cool stuff. I think that some of us in this area are familiar with the One Health concept for sure, and I think it's a fabulous concept to be able to connect the two and having a way of connecting with children. Yes, it's all great. I'm wondering about the funding and what is the funding model for trying to keep this going and offering the lessons and providing those to people who can't afford to pay for them?
Yes, thank you for that. So when it comes to the COVID-19 lesson, everything was free because I wanted to make sure everything was accessible to anybody on the planet, regardless of their, I should raise this point, regardless of their access to electricity too. So I formulated it in a PowerPoint format that's accessible by just printing it out. So you go to a coffee shop with internet, anywhere in the world and print it out, and then you can use it in person. And that's what was pictured in the Nigerian photos because they didn't have access to internet. However, in Peru, there was somebody who had a laptop who downloaded the material and then was teaching the students. And that was funded by an anonymous donor. Now there are commissions that are taking place to build more and more lessons when it comes to One Health and vector-borne diseases. So we do work off of commissions and looking to expand it even more. So if you or your organization wants to get a One Health focused vector-borne disease that's available online and accessible to your target audience, definitely reach out to me at onehealthlessons@gmail.com and we can discuss further.
I have a comment here that I'll read. Let's see. It says, would you be willing to teach a Marist College continuing lifetime studies? I am on the science education committee and we are looking for programs. It could be done remotely like this.
Yes. The answer is yes, for sure. So far, One Health Lessons has been partnering up with several universities to train people, either at the undergraduate or graduate, or even the professors are learning how to teach these lessons to children. Because the professors at universities, we're comfortable talking to 18-year-olds and older, right? But talking to a 6-year-old can be incredibly intimidating for a lot of people, especially if there are 26-year-olds looking at you from the other side of the internet abyss, right? So there's a lesson leaders program, and I'm actually going to be speaking about it more tomorrow, but to give you a little preview, there are a few steps involved in training people with how to educate children. The first step is to have an orientation session. Second step is to watch a full class on the YouTube channel and then taking a quiz after that and making sure that you understand the techniques used to deliver the message of One Health to children. After that, you watch a live lesson. And the way we do that is One Health Lessons has partnered with an organization in California that's affiliated with 1,700 classrooms for children between the ages of 4 and 12. So there's plenty of opportunities to educate children about this and to train how to teach. And then the last part, after observing a live lesson being taught, then you teach a lesson yourself, but with somebody as your backup, somebody to help you. After that, you get a certificate that says that you are a lesson leader, a certified lesson leader. At that point, you use this material and this learning that you've done and comfort with teaching, you bring it back to your own community and teach these lessons in your own first language around the world. After you teach 5 lessons, then you become a One Health Lessons ambassador, so you get promoted, and from there you can teach others in your own first language how to teach these lessons. And that's how we grow, not in a linear fashion, but in an exponential fashion with One Health Lessons. So, don't know if that was more information than what you wanted, but I thought it'd be worthwhile telling you. And also, if you're interested in joining that effort, you can email lesson leaders with an S, program, PROGRAM, so the American spelling of program, at gmail.com. So lesson leaders program at gmail.com.
I'll have that included in the minutes as well, so people can reference that later. Yeah. Let's see, I'll just read a few comments that came in. Scott Larson said, thank you. I really appreciate the messaging towards younger generations. Ashley Kennedy just wanted to say thank you and great talk, and so did Jeff Morgan. And yeah, any other comments or questions for Deb? All right. And then Deb kind of already mentioned this before, but tomorrow is our TIC IPM special session. I know some of you are already registered, but if you haven't yet, there's still time to register. I'm giving everyone until the end of the day today. Deb will be presenting like she mentioned, and then we'll also have Tom Mather, who many of you are familiar with, along with Megan Dyer, who's going to be talking about natural tick repellents and how effective they are. And registration is just really affordable, $20. So we hope that some of you guys will join us. And we're thankful to be sponsored by the North Central IPM Center, Tick Box, and US Biologics for this event. So thank you to everyone that has sponsored us, and we hope to see you guys there tomorrow. Feel free to email me if you would be interested in registering for that, and or visit the working group's website. So yeah, excited to see everyone there, and excited to see Deb again tomorrow. Right,
Wonderful. Thank you.
Yeah, and then I should say before we sign off, any updates from the working group members that anyone would like to share? All right, sounds like none, so we'll go ahead and sign off. And then we got one last comment from Joellen Lampman, just to say that you did a great presentation. So, and we look forward to seeing you tomorrow.
Wonderful. Thanks again, everybody. Nice to meet you all.
Bye.